Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Sam Gabriel here, and welcome to What If Deku Was in 1B Part 4. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, so we begin. Izuku and Awase were about to stand up from their hiding spot when Shiozaki used her vines to drag them down. She had a finger on her lips as the two boys took a deep breath and watched as Vlad swiftly retreated. Without wasting a single second, the teacher sprang forward again and delivered a heavy blow to the blue-haired villain's stomach. Using this moment of weakness, Vlad sped forward, blood gushing in a wave from his glove as he prepared to deliver another punch.
I am not the final boss.
Before Vlad's fist could make contact, Izuku and the other two with him shook with fear as they laid their eyes on the sudden appearance of the new monstrous opponent. The thing was quite a bit taller than Vlad as its emotionless eyes that were sticking out of its exposed brain stared into nowhere. Its beak-like mouth was pulled open almost mockingly to a permanent smile which only sent disturbing shivers down the children's spines as it opened its mouth with a dry shriek. Before anyone could react, it raised an arm as the sound of bones crunching could be heard as blood gushed into the air. 13, a rescue hero. Despite having part of his intangible body sucked into nothing from 13's black hole, the mist villain calmly addressed the hero. You have little fighting experience or battlefield awareness. A portal opened behind 13, and the hero gasped as the gate pulled her body backwards. He opened a warp gate! The yellow eyes within the mist smirked as 13 was a victim to her own quirk, her spacesuit cracking apart. Before anyone could even say another word, only half of 13's bodysuit remained as the villain sighed. How unfortunate. You've turned yourself into dust. The students couldn't react as 13's voice rasped out, I'm sorry, he got me, as she fell to the ground. 13! Tokage shrieked as her dark olive-green eyes widened with worry. Kurogiri, go! Hononuki softened the floor where Kurogiri stood, and the boy with a body made of darkness crashed past the mist villain and towards the USJ gates. I can see you're trying to escape. I simply can't allow that. Kurogiri was about to activate his quirk when Toguro Kamakiri sprang forward, blades protruding from his arms. The mantis-like boy let out a wild battle yell as he jumped at the mist villain, his blades slicing in all directions. Pony swallowed her fear as she noticed something, and her two horns detached from her head. They flew at the intangible villain, and, aiming them at the metal collar, her eyes lit up as they made physical contact. I don't know his quirk, but he has neck armor. He has physical body. Pony's point, made from broken Japanese, was correct as she carried the villain sky high with her horns before quickly growing another pair. Kamakiri grinned before running for the USJ doors and, with another battle cry, slashed through the steel, making an escape hole. Kurogiri, grab on! Hononuki called out to Kurogiri, who reached out as Pony's second set of horns lifted him off the ground. Kurogiri's body was expanding rapidly, but before he could do so, Pony let out her own battle cry, and the boy made of complete darkness was quickly carried through the door. Tokage was by 13 and let out a sigh as she saw Kurogiri get thrown into the woods that were by the path. The student immediately merged with the shadows, and in a blink, he was gone.
I know who you are.
The blue-haired villain rasped out from the solidified cage of blood he was stuck in. Even though the unknown monster was crushing the teacher, Vlad used his spilt blood to his advantage by encasing the villain.
No matter what you think of him, Vlad King, he's the anti-symbol of peace. But you can call him Nomu.
The Nomu opened up its yellow jaws, teeth ominously sharp as an inhuman cry screeched out. A sickening crunch echoed out as the beast had a knee on Vlad's back, almost casually twisting the teacher's elbow backwards. Vlad grunted heavily, losing control of his quirk, and the blue-haired villain exasperatedly shook off the blood. The hero's gloved hand twitched, trying to regain control, but with another deafening crack, the Nomu broke Vlad's other arm too. A pool of blood was slowly spreading out as the Nomu lifted Vlad's struggling head and slammed it back down. A small crater formed where the head was, and the blue-haired villain cackled.
You may be strong, Vlad, but Nomu is stronger than all might.
The Nomu was casually playing with Vlad's body as the mist villain suddenly appeared next to the blue-haired one. There were students I was unable to disperse, And one of them got outside the facility, he reported, and there was a sudden change in the other villain's mood. The hand-covered villain started to feverishly scratch his neck, one hand at first, which quickly became two. The students could hear ragged breathing as the villain's shoulders shook, letting out annoyed grunts as his body convulsed from agitation.
You fool.
His head bobbed up and down as he stared down in frustration.
If you hadn't put up the warp gate, I'd tear apart every last atom in your body.
A sharp intake of breath, as dry as sandpaper, scratched out as the blue-haired villain lifted his head. His fingers parted to reveal agitated skin, scratched up so harshly that it was painful to notice.
And I was looking forward to finishing this today. Damn it. Let's go home.
The villain's arms fell to his sides with a slump as he turned to the mist villain. The three peeking students turned to each other and nodded silently.
But before we leave, let's make sure the symbol of peace is broken.
Shivers went up the students' spines as the hand-covered villain turned towards them. They got up and jumped a step back instinctively.
Let's wreck his pride.
A wall of vines broke out from Shiozaki as the villain took less than a second to be mere centimeters away from their faces. They had no time to react as they froze. The villain slowly became gray and started to disintegrate into nothing as Izuku snapped out of it. Awase! The black-haired boy blinked and nodded before swallowing his shock. He ran forward and quickly fused the soles of the villain's shoes to the ground before the three of them promptly retreated. They waded slightly more into the shallow water where the light was, so Shiozaki had the highest advantage, but the villain just sighed before getting up and turned to look at where Vlad was still struggling in vain.
Vlad, your stamina lives up to its reputation,
the villain rasped.
That's so cool.
Izuku's mind spun as he saw the villain slowly make his way to their teacher, as a foreboding image entered his mind. Izuku could only see red with the silhouette of their teacher crumbling to pieces as the villain got closer. No! Hey! That was all Awase could get out as Izuku's body raced forward with a mind of its own, his arm raised and ready to throw a punch to the villain's turned back. You! Let him go! Now! Scarlet lightning streaks glowed down Izuku's arm as the fist he pulled back came crashing forward, aided with a battle cry. Smash! A violent wave of dense wind pressure blinded the area where Izuku's fist was, as the shockwave his punch brought brutally dragged the small-time villains away. Their bodies were flung like ragdolls as waves crashed wildly, but all the destructive power left Izuku in shock. Wait, where did he come from? His fist trembled a little as Izuku pulled his unbroken arm back a bit from the Nomu, who suddenly towered over him. It didn't hurt him?
This smash of yours. Are you one of All Might's disciples? Doesn't matter. I'm done with you now.
Izuku quivered slightly as the Nomu's large hand grabbed the outstretched arm and pulled him forward, the other inhuman hand lifting high up, ready to kill. Time seemed to slow down as Shiozaki and Awase ran forward in an attempt to help. A vine reaching for Izuku as the hand-covered villain attempted to grab Awase. The doors burst open in a cloud of dust, and the 5 students surrounding 13's broken body turned their heads. The villains also turned to look, as footsteps powerfully echoed louder. Tokage and Pony let out a sigh of relief as the bulky figure strode forward. Have no fear! Everyone turned to look at the hero with an expression they had never seen before. The symbol of peace was not smiling as he glared at the villains. I am here! Awase pulled himself away from the blue-haired villain's outstretched hand as vines wrapped around Izuku's waist, picking him out of the Nomu's grasp. He's here! All Might! The hand-covered villain sighed, interest turning toward the latest newcomer and away from the children.
Ha! Looks like our game's getting a continue.
All attention was on All Might as his voice rang out. I had a feeling that something was wrong when Vlad and 13 didn't answer my calls. Kurogiri had suddenly appeared in front of All Might by jumping out of the shadows and explained the situation. It caused the number 1 to get frustrated, because he didn't like the idea of scared students or injured colleagues. All Might stood at the edge of the stairs as he ripped the tie off from around his neck threateningly. Vlad had staggered onto his feet and kicked the blabbering villain to the ground, as All Might suddenly appeared next to them. Before Izuku and the other two could even comprehend the situation, the three of them were suddenly in All Might's arms and carried to where Vlad was. The wind pressure from the rapid rescue knocked the blue-haired villain forward, and the hand from his face fell to the floor. "Everybody back to the entrance!" All Might ordered as the villain muttered to himself.
He's not as fast as I thought he would be. Not as fast as he used to be. I guess it's true after all.
He picked up the hand and placed it against his face as he grinned savagely.
All Might really is weaker.
Izuku turns to All Might as Vlad returned most of his spilt blood into his body. "The brain villain! I smashed it, but it didn't break my arm this time. He wasn't even phased at all. He's too strong." "Young Midoriya!" All Might turns to the worried Greenette with a smile and struck a pose. "I got this." Without wasting a second, All Might flew towards the blue-haired villain with his arms crossed. "Carolina Smash!" The wind pressure caused waves to rise from behind the villain viciously, but he was safe as the Nomu stood there. Its arms were spread wide, positioned like All Might as it stared down at the number one hero. It let out a horrifying smile as gigantic arms wildly made a grab, but All Might nimbly ducked down. "Guess he wasn't wrong when he said it had no effect on you!" Another smash aimed at the Nomu's stomach made contact with a heavy thud, but the creature didn't even seem phased. It turns to All Might again, but the hero swiftly sent another dense punch to the Nomu's face. Another punch to the side of its face was briskly thrown with no effect, as an uppercut straight to the chest thrown forward. Yet the Nomu still seemed undisturbed, as forceful strikes rained down on its body.
Nomu here has shock absorption, All Might. The only way you can hurt him is to gouge out his flesh slowly. Of course, I don't think it's going to sit back and let you do that.
The hand-covered villain raised both hands slightly, as All Might accelerated to behind the Nomu with a grin. "Thanks for telling me how to beat him!" Grabbing it by the waist, the hero lifted the Nomu off its feet and threw him headfirst into the ground behind in a back hip throw. Wind broke out everywhere again as Vlad brought the students away. It's possible they have a way to kill him. Izuku was still bubbling with worry as he knew about All Might's limit, and the blood slightly trickling past All Might's lips negatively answered his concern. The Nomu, which should have been crushed headfirst into the ground, was instead halfway through a portal. The other end was directly under All Might's back, and the monstrous creature had its hands digging into the one weak spot. Blood seeped out and stained the suit shirt, as Izuku froze when he saw this.
Nice, we can bury him in the concrete, so he doesn't move around anymore.
The Nomu's head buried into All Might's stomach, as blood pooled in the number one hero's mouth.
Kurogiri.
The mist villain appeared next to All Might as he sighed.
Normally I wouldn't want blood flooding the insides of my warp gates, but I'll make an exception for a hero as great as you.
All Might had both arms bound to his side. He was halfway in the ground, and the portal tightened around his body.
I'll squeeze the gates shut.
An image of All Might's torso, being the only trace left, entered Izuku's mind as he turned to his homeroom teacher. "Sir, I won't." Vlad looked at his student, who had his back turned to him.
What are you? Where are you?
"I won't let them kill you."
Midoriya, get back here!
Izuku sprinted back towards the fight as All Might struggled to pull Nomu's grasp off his stomach. "I'm coming! All Might!" His body flew forward in an attempt to help, but proved wrong as Kurogiri appeared.
How foolish.
Izuku's eyes widened from fear as he couldn't stop his airborne body when out of nowhere, a giant bolt crashed into his stomach, and it threw the Greenette to the side. "Control your emotions, Midoriya. I wanted you to be representative for that exact reason." Izuku turned to see Monoma standing next to the class's quiet girl, Yui Kodai. With two jumps forward, Monoma was suddenly in front of Kurogiri and touched the metal neckpiece the villain wore. A strangled cry could be heard as the metal shrunk, and Izuku retreated to where his friend stood. At that moment, a blur ran forward, and the Nomu let out a cry as Kaimara's leg drilled into its eye. All Might took a moment to grab the Nomu's arms and ripped his body free just as Tetsu came running for the blue-haired villain. His frontal assault failed, however, as the villain dodged to the side.
Damn, that was gonna be cool!
Monoma just sighed as he updated Izuku, who calmed down. I was in the ruin zone. Kodai's quirk is size. It changes the size of non-living things. He's currently suffocating because I shrunk that metal brace Pony mentioned. I only have another 2. 37 on Shota's twin impact. He tapped Kodai, who nodded and ran toward their class as Kaibara also stepped back. Kurogiri stopped struggling as his oxygen supply was low, but the portal splitting the Nomu shifted despite his unmoving mist body. Incoherent noises came from the Nomu as it fully emerged on one side of the gates, and Kaibara frowned in disgust as the hole he made automatically healed.
What is this?
All Might yelled out, and the blue-haired villain smiled.
I never said shock absorption was his only quirk. He also has super regeneration.
All Might clutched at his wounded side as the villain continued.
It has been modified to take you down even at 100% of your power. Go, Nomu.
There was no movement for a second, as the Nomu stood there dauntingly, and Izuku's eyes widened.
Monoma!
The brick wall nearly crashed to the floor and created a huge dust cloud, as Izuku looked at the empty spot where Monoma stood. Calm down, I'm behind you, Midoriya. The greenette sighed in relief as he saw Monoma was suddenly behind him, but that meant one thing. The boys turned to the setting dust to see All Might in a defensive position. He had saved Monoma and took the hit, since the Nomu aimed to retrieve Kurogiri. Izuku was a lot more calmer than he expected, and it was probably because Monoma made sure he thought before he acted. Gritting his teeth, he saw he was only in the number one's way.
Retreat!
Tetsu, being the only musclehead there, was complaining, but with Monoma, Kaibara, and Izuku all retreating, he was convinced and ran after them as the hand-covered villain watched.
They're kids, and you don't hold back?
All Might bellowed angrily, but the villain only shrugged.
That plain-looking one.
He pointed at Izuku, who was getting further and further away.
He tried to kill me with a maxed-out punch. What kind of hero does that? You heroes can be as violent as you want as long as you say it's to save others. Well, you know what, All Might? That pisses me off.
He got more and more riled up as his hand-covered body twitched.
Why do some people get to decide that some violent acts are heroic and others are villainous? Who gets to judge what's good and what's evil?
The monologue ended, and All Might clenched a fist.
I barely have a minute left in this form, but I have to stop these villains.
The tall blonde stood straight up,
Because I am
focusing on Nomu.
the world's symbol of peace and justice.
The children watched from a safe distance as All Might and the Nomu slammed their fists against each other. That single collision broke the sound barrier as the force erupted across the facility. Not only had the blue-haired villain been pushed back by the sheer wind pressure, and the whole area cleared in preparation for their fight.
Weren't you listening? One of his quirks is shock absorption.
The rasped voice was almost angry as All Might didn't seem to care.
Yeah? What about it?
All Might drew his arm back as another explosively hefty punch collided, quickly followed by another as the two powerhouses aggressively faced each other. A battle cry rang from All Might's lungs as their exchange of violent blows became a rampaging slugfest. Limbs became frenzied blurs as the symbols of peace and anti-peace increased their speed, savagely plowing forward in an out-of-control stalemate. Trees trembled, and waves briskly parted as All Might yelled out,
He said your quirk was shock absorption, not nullification.
Suddenly, All Might's fierce strikes accelerated, and the Nomu's body was getting pushed back. A punch to All Might's stomach caused the hero to spit blood through clenched teeth, but a more intense battle cry swiftly followed. His azure blue eyes glinted as All Might started to dominate the raging Nomu.
There's a limit on how much you can take, right?
The blue-haired villain was silent as he stood by Kurogiri. The Mist Man had recovered by breaking the metal brace, and now stood there with his neck exposed, albeit the rest of his body still intangible.
I just have to go beyond. I'll force you to surrender.
The volley of rampaging attacks doubled and seemed to break right as the Nomu was getting overwhelmed. The teacher had no reason to hold back since the students were far away and targeted each punch to win. All Might aggressively punched the Nomu across the stone floors, grabbing the creature and forcefully spun it around his body. Like a shot put, the fight became airborne as All Might jumped high up, using the spinning momentum to throw the Nomu back onto the ground viciously. A crater instantly split the area into pieces as All Might's body landed like a meteorite.
You may have heard of these words before, but I'll teach you what they really mean.
Pressure spiked as All Might rewound a fist.
Go beyond! Plus Ultra!
Surpassing the speed of light, All Might's fist burned like the sun as Nomu's hulking body took the hit right in the guts. With no way to absorb any of the violent pressure, the Nomu's body bent forward, and the sound of the USJ ceiling breaking made everyone face up. Glass fell like twinkling stars from the hole created, and the sun warmly shone its rays into the facility. Happy cheers erupted from the students as Izuku shakingly smiled. Komori was jumping up and down as Tokage excitedly patted his shoulder.
He did it. That was like the finishing move of a video game. He beat the shock absorption right out of him.
Tetsu muttered in awe, and Monoma nodded. That's what a pro is.
He really is the best.
Ganbara sighed. All Might turns to the two left. The unnamed hand villain stood defensively as Kurogiri's body expanded. It was both intimidating and defensive as the tides of battle turned. The hero knew he had to end the fight fast. He just threw 300 punches and could barely hold on to his form anymore.
Surrender! We all want to get this over with quickly.
The blue-haired villain quivered from anger, voice seething with venom as he spoke.
He cheated.
The villain's skin scratched like Velcro as he looked at the number 1.
He's just as strong as he's always been. Damn it. Don't tell me I was lied to.
Didn't you say you were going to clear this level earlier? Come and get me!
All Might challenged the fuming villain, but Izuku knew, even from a distance, can't beat them. He's bluffing. It's almost hidden by the dust, but I can see it. The steam coming off his body is the same as when he's about to transform. Izuku's body quivered as he wanted to run back on the scene. He's out of time. Midoriya, what is it? Monoma had noticed how Izuku froze up, and the greenette could only point at All Might. Despite wanting to ask questions, Monoma's intuition and intelligence told him to listen as Izuku calmed down. We need to distract the villain. Any silent long range. Tokage's quirk. Monoma and Tokage both nodded as Kurogiri spoke to the other. We can defeat All Might if we work together. He has been weakened. The neck scratching stopped when this was mentioned as the hand villain slumped forward.
The big end boss is right here.
All Might clenched his teeth as he stood still. Any movement now could force him to reveal his proper form.
This is it!
The hand villain started to run forward as he rasped out,
Consider this revenge for what you did to Nomu!
Kurogiri was right behind the other, portals opening as they lunged at All Might.
Where is everyone?
Tokage! Monoma! Hurry!
I need backup!
Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now, there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video as well as the editor for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, go to the Discord in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day.